Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is definitely ministerial responsibility for this debacle, and it's ministerial responsibility that goes back many years. As has come out in the reports that have been released on the debacle last Friday night, the big problem is the lack of sufficient transport infrastructure, particularly rail infrastructure. It is, and combined with, on the day, a lack of sort of fallback options in terms of extra buses, communications between trains and the control centre and things like that. And of course there was a problem in underestimating the numbers, I think that shouldn't have happened really, because as I wandered around Mount Eden last week, there were all sorts of flags going up on people's houses of different nations and on cars, and everyone was getting into it. So the size of the crowd down in the downtown area, particularly with the fireworks display and everything else, was to be expected, and adjustments should have been made. But the real problem is the lack of transport infrastructure in Auckland. We have a city of something like 1.4 million people, about the same size as Perth in Western Australia, and yet Auckland couldn't handle 60,000 rail passengers when Perth manages twice that amount, 120,000 every day. So we really, and there's ministerial responsibility for that, as Deputy Mayor Penny Hulse pointed out on Radio New Zealand yesterday morning. She said how all the mayors had gone down to Wellington 4 years back, to plead for money for rail and for electrification, and had been turned down. The Green Party was pushing and had petitions and everything else in 2006 saying we've got to move ahead fast with this electrification, but there was stalling, and we were saying at the time when the World Cup was granted to New Zealand, look, this is our target, 2011. We can get electrification by that stage. Let's get the money in. Let's do it. And, of course, as the lack of funding continued, had to cut back that. At least we can get one of the railway lines to Eden Park electrified, and Mike Lee, mentioned by the previous speaker, was pushing that as well. The present government has slowed up the process even more by knocking off the fuel tax that was going to pay for some of these improvements, including electrification, and there's been delay, and look where we are now. And it isn't a problem of Aucklanders not wanting public transport. When the North Shore Busway came on stream, the patronage was much greater than expected, and everyone has liked that busway. And even on rail, despite its great inadequacies, the patronage has gone up over the last decade from 1 million journeys to 9 million journeys. So there's no problem of people, and I think what that event last Friday showed, that if there's a bit of push to get on the rail, if they can see that it's going to be useful, they will take the rail. 60,000 tried to, and of course the infrastructure didn't match up. Stephen Joyce has been poo-pooing the last couple of days and last few weeks the idea of a CBD tunnel, saying, it's too expensive and it's not needed and all the rest of it. Surely, if there's one thing that this silliness on Friday showed, it showed that we do need it. Anyone with a bit of common sense knows that if you've got a tunnel, if you've got a circle, as they have in Sydney, for example, any other major city has circles and connected routes and things like that. If you've got a circle, that all the people stuck in Britomart on Friday night, they could have gone out on the trains two ways rather than one way as at present. It's been covered around the world. Our public transport system and rail system is a laughingstock around the world because of the delays over years. And it's tragic right now, where there's 35 times more being spent on roading in the current budget than on public transport infrastructure. That is a disgrace. And then there's the question of the extension of the party zone, which is a common sense thing to do, to have more room for people to move and more toilets and other facilities down there. That's a common sense decision. But for the minister to just kick the council in the face, the council that it in effect put in place with its legislation, and then to just kick the mayor, kick the council in the face and say that the minister is declaring and you have failed and we're declaring the extension of the party zone, that is completely unacceptable. And there's a very interesting article in a Victoria University paper just come out, I think yesterday or today, by Dean Knight, a lecturer up there, where he says that the minister himself is breaching the law, that the way these urgent applications work under the Rugby World Cup Empowerment Bill is that the authority has to receive the application and then make a recommendation to the minister to decide. And if the minister decides in advance of that recommendation going before the authority, then the minister should disqualify himself. And I ask now that Murray McCully disqualify himself in that decision. I don't think it's technically been made yet, and let another minister, as suggested by Dean Knight in this legal journal. And I think it shows the problem of the Rugby World Cup Empowering Bill and the Major Events Management Bill, the two acts that were brought in preparation for this World Cup, that while there is good reason for streamlining some of the consent processes for such a big occasion, what these two bills have done, in some ways, have made the situation worse, and that ministers and planning people have thought, oh, well, we can always, if anything goes wrong at the last minute, we can just rush through what we like, and there has been a dramatic failure of planning over the years. And I think the bills, as well as being a bit of a transgression on people's rights, and also allowing ministers like Murray McCully to strut around and say, look, I can rule what I like, even though technically they're against the fine print of the legislation. That sort of concept of these all-powerful bills, which the Green Party has opposed in this and other cases, I think this is a good case for not, being more considered on what legislation we bring in. And I think it's very important, this whole question of the government attacking a local body, as Murray McCully has over the past couple of days. It's just not the way that democracy should work. And as Brian Rudman said, there's another person with a surname of M who tried to make I think in this case, the Italians' trains go on time. And I think every time we see that sort of behaviour rearing its ugly head, we should be concerned. There's a lot more that can be done to look at this whole matter and hopefully to point the way ahead for greater public transport infrastructure, put the money in, speed up the process, speed up the electrification, speed up the CBD rail tunnel, speed up a railway to the airport. It would have been great to have had that for our visitors to the World Cup. And also do the connection with the North Shore. That might have helped when there's a block up on the ferries. If there'd been an underground rail tunnel from the North Shore bringing people into the central city, that would have been great too. People obviously want to come downtown. They want to develop a wonderful Auckland downtown. Of course, there's a lot to do in terms of the waterfront. The Wynyard Quarter has been a big step forward, but there's a lot more to do. But if we're going to develop the downtown, we have to have the transport to bring people into it. And we should do more in this Parliament to discuss this issue. My colleague Gareth Hughes asked that the Transport and Industrial Relations Committee, as I understand, to have some sort of inquiry that sort of fits under their select committee. That was turned down by the majority on the committee. I think we can't run away from this. We have to take responsibility as a Parliament. We're discussing ministerial responsibility here, but as a Parliament we have to deal with this. The Green Party will be making the question of public transport in Auckland, particularly rail transport, a major issue in this election. I think the people of Auckland see that this government, and sad to say the previous government, have failed to really speed up and provide what Auckland requires.
I acknowledge the honourable member Heather